Welcome to the Powered by Age-Friendly City Zoomcast reality-style podcast.
We are movers and shakers, shaking up the old notion of silent, helpless, invisible seniors.
This is a new series of podcasts funded by the City of Vancouver and the 411 Senior Center Society.
As PBA AFC ambassadors, we
raise awareness,
share our original stories and poems,
inform, advocate, and involve seniors in discussing important social issues.
In short, these podcasts will help us,
you, in creating an age-friendly city for Vancouver today,
tomorrow the world.
You can hear us everywhere podcasts are heard. Okay, welcome to Powered by Age-Friendly City. This is a podcast in the making. We are going to today introduce each person, and we're going to be talking about advocacy and also giving a forecast of topics that we plan to do in the upcoming weeks so that people that want to work on or be involved with those issues will be able to do so. So Chris, we'll start with you.
Oh, I'm Chris Morrissey, and I live in East Van, and I belong to a group called Quirky, Queer Imaging and Writing for Collective for Elders, and we meet every week at Britannia. Normally, now of course we meet every week using Zoom. So I'm happy to be here and to meet with others from other parts of the city who are also aging and old, or however we want to define ourselves, and to meet people from other parts of the city.
Leslie?
Yes, I'm Leslie Hebert. I live in New Westminster. I teach English online using Skype. I'm also a writer, a member of the New Westminster Literary Arts. And I'm also a member of the New Westminster Council of Women, although that hasn't been very active recently given the current situation. But it's an advocacy organization, so perhaps this will relate to some of the topics that we'll be dealing with coming up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Judith Rainey, and I'm a member of the South Granville Senior Center. I live in the Fairview Slopes area, and I'm just basically a citizen at large, I guess.
Okay. Luke.
Hey, I'm Luke, and I'm working with 411 to help them transition their programming from in real life to some online digital offerings. Totally hit by allergies today, so if I'm sniffling a lot, please forgive me. I'll try to keep my finger on the mute button here.
Okay. Adele?
Hi, I'm Adele. I started working for the 411, and I'm also a filmmaker and a poet. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to. I actually do advocacy work myself. I was kind of volunteering for Amnesty for a while, so I'm really looking forward to discussing what advocacy means.
Around advocacy, what does advocacy mean to you? Judith, what does it mean to you?
Means speaking up and identifying relevant organizations and people in the city and the provincial government and the federal government that can assist.
What is your take on advocacy, Leslie?
Things that Judith said, plus perhaps networking, speaking for people who need people to speak for them, perhaps the disadvantaged, people that are outside the mainstream.
Adele, you said you were involved in advocacy. What does advocacy mean to you, and how did you experience it?
Well, I said advocacy to me kind of like, it looks like being able to speak up on other people's behalf. You know, some of us, I mean, it's also like, and how you use the privileges that you have in your own life to be able to empower other people who are disadvantaged. And so providing people platforms to speak up about issues or being the face of certain issues and movements, so that things will move forward. But I let's just see advocacy as having words or having a voices heard that usually are silenced, and providing them to feel powerful and to be able to say what they need to say. So that's how I've looked at advocacy. And I try to be an advocate myself by following up on injustices and speaking up on people's behalf and stuff like that. So.
Trying to make society a better place.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, it's hard, but all we can do is try and keep providing our voice.
Pat, introduce yourself. And right now we're talking, our topic today is advocacy. And so what is your definition or experience with advocacy?
Okay, well, I'm Pat, as we all know by this time. Sorry I'm late. I couldn't find the link, so thank you for sending it. Well, my experience with advocacy has been a lot over the years with women and violence and speaking out and for lesbian rights, and children to some extent too, as well as speaking out about racism and other kinds of discrimination is what I'm trying to be conscious of all the time, and living it my life, and living it being part of my life. Yeah.
What for me, one of the elements of advocacy is working to bring about change, like whether the changes, whether we're accompanying somebody, and for example, they're having trouble with the ministry of some ministry, and they want people to accompany them to advocate on their behalf. But there's also a collective advocacy, where a group of people come together because they want to bring about change. And I've been involved in that kind of advocacy to the point where a number of years ago, on the federal level, myself and a few other people that organized with me, managed to get the federal government to change immigration legislation. So there's a self-advocacy, and my experience is the self-advocacy that's done with other people. I always go by Margaret Mead's saying, right, about something about a small group of committed people are the only things that have actually brought about change. And so that for me is a significant part of advocacy. It can be behalf on an individual. It can be behalf on myself. It can be on behalf of a group of people that we all share we all share similar concerns or similar identification. For example, now we're all of a certain age, and if we saw there was something that was unjust in the law or unjust in the practice, the way the law was applied, then we get together and we form a group and we say, we want this to change. And so we advocate for the change to come about for the better for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Judith, what have some of your experiences with advocacy or issues been?
Oh my, going back a ways. So I would connect with friends and colleagues and thought about writing to bring about change, writing music and songs, and it's really very difficult to explain, but it was sort of behind the scenes.
You mentioned a song, because there have been a lot of awareness songs and protest songs that people have written to affiliate or associate with particular movements or issues.
Right.
Pat, do you find what are some of the risks in being an advocate or getting involved in an advocacy around a particular issue?
I guess it depends. I think nowadays it's a lot easier because there's so much of it out there. I mean, people, it's a language people are see a lot. But I know that when we did a lot of work when I was in the Okanagan, we opened up a transition house for women and did a lot of stuff. It was it was not easy, and people were not necessarily supportive of what we were doing. And certainly then there was, when lesbians started speaking out about their own rights and being recognized for who they were, there was a lot of threats and so on like that. So, um, but I think as I see it anyway, and as we live it now, that things are certainly there still is a lot of dangers, but it's not the same as it was back then, at least with some issues. On the other hand, there are some issues that are very prominent now, racism, particularly as we speak right now in the Chinese and the Asian community around COVID-19. It's pretty horrible. So.
Yeah, I've been involved in both advocacy and protest movements. Advocacy is at that part where you first start just raising people's awareness. When I was in college at Wayne State University, and there was no Black Studies program. And around the country, different people were having peaceful meetings with administrations presenting the cause for, research, the need, uh, validation. And in some places it was fine. And then it wasn't until it moved to having demonstrations or protests. And then they got to be news media because sometimes police moved in and hit, disturbed, didn't allow people to exercise their democratic right to protest. My experience at Wayne State was,
Mm.
we asked for a meeting, Black Student Association asked for a meeting with the president, it was denied. Then organizing a march and a protest, when the news media picked up on it, then all of a sudden we got a meeting with the president, and then they began to work to facilitate it through. Um, with some of the things of raising awareness, back to the Vietnam War, there were people meeting, uh, helping people to understand why it was a morally corrupt war. And some people were ostracized, getting involved, because the media sometimes, when people organize to advocate or organize to uh, educate, they will say they're troublemakers or dissidents. And so then this kind of schism comes up between the people who are saying, oh, you undemocratic people, and other people saying, it's a participatory democracy and we have a right. It's happening now, it happened with in the anti-war movement. I experienced being gassed, a peaceful demonstration, being in a place in, the capital of the country where people are supposed to be able to go and present their case. Uh, People saying, no, there's this line. If you cross this line, you'll be gassed. And so they actually did gas people. So some of the risks sometimes, according to how much you believe a thing, and when it moves from when you're raising awareness and when you are making appeals to a government or appeals to an organization, and they either don't hear you or try to limit your ability to speak, then things get ugly. It's,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I think there, I had an experience with it interviewing students at Simon Fraser close to the time of the election. And so we were asking people a question that started right at the 411 Center. The Philosopher's Cafe had a discussion about it is dangerous not to know what the issues are because the media sometimes just covers sound bites. And so they had quite an interesting discussion. So I was attempting to have the same type of discussion, with some students. What's your issue? What issue do you think the people running for office should talk about? And there were so many people who said, oh, I don't get involved with politics. That's demonstrations, that's bad. Or people might think that I'm not grateful for my education. So I think that those of us, have you had that kind of experience with talking with people about getting involved around peaceful discussion of an issue or peacefully agitating for change?
I have. I feel like so I come from South Sudan, and a lot of the issues that are going on with the country are it's like the aftertaste of imperialism, and trying to advocate for them to be seen through my films and to get their stories made has been really challenging because the story it's deep, and the origins of it are like what's it called, where you having to point fingers, and so I think one thing about advocacy or trying to like help a marginalized group is the resistance that comes with it, just because nobody wants to take fault for something or for the issues. And so trying to do it with a neutral approach has been the most difficult because, we advocate for those things that we're passionate about, but passion sometimes can change the way that you passion has a funny way of expressing itself, especially when you get into a group mentality, you all start to fire each other up. And so I think the difficulty with advocacy is trying to remain neutral and trying to remember what the cause is and the point of everything and how you go about it, because the most important thing is not your job isn't to try to make enemies. Your job is just to try to just show why this is important and why people need to be heard or seen or supported, but every time you do that, you kind of bring out the shadow of how this all happened, and then nobody wants to take fault. And so I feel like that's what the difficulty with advocacy is. And then also like the systems that are put in place in our world, we've got like everything has been put is become systemic, and so trying to undo an archaic system while trying to advocate for change with a conservative like governing body, I don't know, it's really hard. So I think trying to find the change and trying to be a voice without creating enemies, I think is probably the most difficult thing that I found with being an advocate. But at the same time, I think it is important to keep your truth and to, fight for what you believe in and not mind that and be polarizing. So there's all this controversy that happens inside of yourself where you're like, but what should I do? How should I do this? Blah, blah, blah. So, those are the challenges that I found with advocacy and all the questions I've come up with myself where I'm like, so at which point am I getting lost in the sauce where I'm like, okay, when you start advocating for something, people start to see you and then they distract you, that's what the media does. They're like, look over here, oh, look, and then you forget what you're doing. So there's all these things that you have to try to maintain when trying to make changes and, see that change. But yeah, that's what I've seen. Anybody else want to chime in here?
I guess it's always hard to be on the leading edge, right? I kind of think about the environmental movement when it first started out. You had Greenpeace and Rainbow Warrior, and they were kind of, they got a lot of criticism from the mainstream. Now environmental concerns, 20 or 30 years later, are much more mainstream.
Yeah.
But it was because of the battles originally that the environmental advocates were willing to undertake, right?
Yeah.
Same with the union movement, same thing, right?
Well, somebody needs to pave the way, right? I mean, when you usually when you're walking through it, it's filled with like thorns and blah, 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 and you have to go through, and one person needs to go tread it out, and then so that everybody else can walk it later. And that's what I've seen in like in history, like the pattern that repeats itself is, there's this big road full of trees and everything is covered. And you got to go tread your way through it so that the next people can walk through. So I think it all depends on which part of the movement you become, whether you want to lead it or you want to try to continue on a path that's already been created. So advocacy can be really difficult because I guess it's trying to find where you belong in there. And then
it's sort of interesting looking back. We admire the brave ones that led the way, but do any of us, are any of us really brave enough to do that? I think very few of us are.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a challenging and interesting dichotomy to try to like to learn, and I think it's also the advocacy. It's a lot of unlearning, you know. Every 20 years or every 10 years, we need to just change the way we do things, and it can be really hard because nobody likes change, and we're all it. So when you're advocating for something to be different, you know, what do you think, guys think?
Well, I think with, you know, the not BC nurses, the nurses in Ontario and in Quebec, they were last night, many were protesting and just outraged at the condition that the military found when they went into senior homes. And people said, we've been talking about it for years, but now it's come to a head. So many people have died. And so the nurses, I think, in stepping out, there are probably people that criticize them, but I don't know. What do you feel? Did you see any of the protests by the nurses last night when the military released their report on the condition of senior care facilities?
I just read it. I didn't see it. Yeah, I just read the report. Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
I was watching all the protests in the States about I forget the name of the man that was killed, you know, by the police.
Oh, yeah.
And it's brought out in Minneapolis, I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah, that's raising on social media right now. Everybody's discussing and they're writing really, really intensely. So the world's in a state of chaos right now, but that's what happened, you know.
But I think, you know, that it just kind of, when we say what is our role, so it means at some points the things that are being addressed, people had addressed them before, like within the states. Black Lives Matter beginning and protesting about how police were using chokeholds and other illegal things, killing people or seriously injuring Black people. And there were some people saying, oh, the civil rights movement is over. You got all your rights. Why are you, you know, they were stopping traffic on the freeways, doing some really dangerous things to bring people's attention. And it seemed like, you know, it had died down, and then, you know, people could clearly see this officer grinding his knee into a man's neck until, you know, he caused him to die. So I think, you know, with the nurses and people who were protesting, and, you know, some families who had lost family members that said, we've been telling the government this for years, that there wasn't adequate staffing, people weren't being looked after. And so the two premiers were, I think, feeling embarrassed, but it also made me think, you know, about us, other people who hear a group talking about something, you know, how do we move in, you know, to support that, to bring attention to it. Do you have examples of where that's happened, where somebody, you know, had been protesting something, but then as other people got concerned, they began to support them?
Wait, can you repeat that question?
No, I was saying, do you see other examples of things that have happened, you know, within Canada or worldwide, where there've been an issue, like this environmental issue? You know, you mentioned people were being called tree huggers, or some people were making fun of the environmentalists, but now we have children who people said weren't interested in politics at all that are organizing massive protests. So I was saying, do you see other places where, you know, there'd been a long-standing issue and people were talking about it, but then the difference that came about when more people, you know, moved from awareness to supporting?
I think a lot of First Nations issues are having this now. You know, for years they were fighting for, I think we talked about this yesterday, the missing Indigenous women. That inquiry has people, it's been going on for so long, and it took a long time to get any coverage, you know. And now people are starting to stand behind it and support it, to be like, the discrepancy in the way that women are treated, especially women on the downtown side and those that are marginalized. So I've noticed something in Vancouver is marginalized groups are starting to are being advocated for more. There's a big PC culture that's starting to what's the word I'm looking for? That's starting to make things softer. I mean, nothing disappears, but people are starting to watch. And I think that that's a movement that has been changed, kind of like changing its course. But yeah, so I think a lot of First Nations issues are finally being addressed by everybody. You know, people are standing in solidarity and fighting against the government for the building of what's it called, pipelines and all that other stuff. So the fact that we're respecting First Nations land, um, all of us together, and starting to stand behind in solidarity with the chiefs and the First Nations people, I think that's a big issue that we haven't seen before.
A lot of it is just understanding what the issues are. I mean, many people just weren't aware before. So, there's a lot of education goes into that as well.
No. Yes, I think that, when we talk about the protests and the protest songs and things like that, I think that's what precedes advocacy, because that is what raises people's awareness. And so people become conscious of the fact that the way things are right now is unjust, with involving whichever group, whether it's First Nations people, whether it's people of color, whether it's Black people, whether it's LGBT folks. It's a question of recognizing that there are injustices and inequality. And to a great extent, you do need to have enough people behind a movement or recognizing that that's there in order for there actually to come about change. Because most of the change we're talking about or what we need and want, is systemic change. We want the system to change, right? We want the legislation to change. And so first there's this whole movement of raising awareness. And then once there's enough people that are aware and educated and who are willing to come forward then and organize. I mean, there's the first level of organization, which is the awareness raising, but then I think there needs to be a group of people that are actually going to work on this in a systemic way to actually bring about the change, because the change is in the system. I mean, the problem is with the system, like the problem with residential schools. That was a systemic issue. Now and the problem with violence against women there's a systemic issue. So I think we have to raise the awareness level first. And then when that's raised and there's enough people that support a change, then people start to actually advocate for the change. I mean, one of the things they say about advocacy is about speaking truth to power. And that's, I mean, my experience, and whether it's the power of a single worker I always call income assistance, whether it's a single person in an office who we know that the legislation is there, but the person just is not applying it, right? Or they have an attitude that doesn't make it possible for them to respond to the need of the person in front. So they take along an advocate, somebody who can say to them, look, this is not okay. And we need you to, in this case, apply the practice to this person in front of you. But on the upper level, I mean, for example, I'm horrified. I sent a letter to my MLA, because when the federal government started giving out $2,000 a month to people to help them survive this loss of jobs and things, I sent a letter to our MLA saying, the federal government seems to think that you can live on $2,000 a month, right? What are we doing in this province with welfare? Nobody who's on welfare gets $2,000 a month. And so, I just did that individually. And I know there have been lots of groups that have organized around those kind of issues, but we don't always get the change that we need right away. Sometimes you have to go on and on and on. I mean, the stuff with the problems of the police in the USA. I mean, there's been protests around that for many years. and there still needs to be protests because the change hasn't actually happened yet, right? I mean, if they charge these last policemen with murder, I'm not sure that will that be a new thing. I can't personally remember a time when a police officer has been involved in something that it's gone beyond being fired.
Now,
I don't
this one is
know.
atypical because it's the first time, a lot of times they've been put on administrative leave. And in
Yes.
some of the news blurbs, the man that was, where they first protesters started doing, I Can't Breathe,
Yeah.
the man that was killed in New York, that person was never charged with anything, and in several other cities.
Yeah,
So
I
I
know.
think it will be a difference. The presence too of a camera, the
Oh, the
advocacy
camera made a
that
difference. And the
has
fact
made
that there
such
were
a difference.
bystanders standing around yelling at the cop to leave the man alone.
Yeah.
And so that's a way of advocacy, and it just seems to be without people telling people use your phone. There have been people like the two policemen that followed a black man, shot him. Somebody was videotaping it, and now they are saying that the videotaper was even connected to that group. So there's a power in using the camera, and I think people just in seeing when something goes viral, the shift that it makes around the movement, that more people are carrying their camera or being bold enough to take a picture and turn it over.
Those those videos raise awareness. They make people realize what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think that sometimes people say that seniors or older people are passive, so they don't really in the elections at the local level as well as at the national level, they didn't seem to specifically address seniors' issues. What do you think it would take to get seniors, or whatever we call ourselves? People said they don't want to be a senior, they don't want to be older, but people of a certain age, how do we get them change the perception? Because that's part of what this podcast is about. How do we change the perception of older people as invisible or powerless or not interested in the issues of the day?
I think just as we've been talking about, by writing letters, by speaking out, by addressing issues that are ageist or ignoring seniors, yeah, and eventually protests or whatever it takes, but by having a voice, a very, very strong public voice by seniors and by people much younger.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like any real issue needs to be like a multi-generational conversation, right?
Yeah.
We all have different perspectives to provide on a certain issue. So I think that uplifting seniors, allowing and like hearing from them, just because I feel like the way that we learn about our lives is through history, right? Like we have to look back at the past to what roads to avoid, or like history has a beautiful way of recreating itself. So I think seniors' voices are important because they've lived it. You know what I mean? We're not like, as humanity, we definitely are really good at keep doing the same thing over and over again. We're insane in that way. So I think having multi-generational conversations around certain advocacy issues really helps provide clearer perspectives so that we can avoid, recreating our past in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's unfair to stereotype seniors as passive. That's a stereotype, right, which we've got to challenge, because
yes,
the passive seniors were probably passive earlier in their lives, right? The feisty seniors were probably always feisty, or they've learned not to care throughout their lives about, and some people as they get older are much less concerned about what people think than they were when they're younger. I think I put myself in that category. I used to really care about what people thought when I was younger. I don't really care so much now. Other people have been kind of beaten back by life and kind of worn down by life. But again, seniors are not just one homogenous group, right?
That's right.
The other thing I think that's interesting, I don't know the stats, but what I do remember is when they talk about how many people vote, the reality is there are more older adults that vote than any other demographic of the people. The problem is not that we don't vote or we're not engaged. The problem is the politicians are not listening, because, I mean, they're beginning to listen now because there's been such a hue and cry. But I mean, the things that if you hear what the nurses and the care aides say, and I've said myself when my partner was in residential care, that we've been saying those things for years and years and years, for a long time. And there hasn't been the political willingness to pay attention, right? But now they know that they have to pay some attention, because there's a lot more people now that have recognized that they're affected by this issue. And so the politicians have to pay attention. We'll see. What I'm hoping is that this continues on past the COVID, right? That's
Yes.
always the fear for me. Is right now everybody's talking about it, and it's on the radio talk shows constantly. The Prime Minister talks about it, but for years there's been people advocating for a national strategy around aging and older people, and there never has been one, right? And so finally, maybe there'll be a response this time around. But I'm always afraid that once the eyes of the public and the eyes of the media are not on the issue anymore, that the politicians forget and go back to whatever it is.
Yeah, and that's a very valid concern.
So now, when we were physically meeting, we had people from 4 different senior centers, as well as some individual organizations coming. What are things that we can do now to either contact senior groups or people to suggest to them? Like you wrote a letter to your representative. Are there things that we can put in the mail? Are there things that we can say or show within our program? What can we do to bring more older people contacting their representatives to say, we want, how do you stand? Or this is the stand we'd like for you to take on this issue of residential care.
My focus right now is on trying to entice a 90-year-old friend of mine to get involved with Zoom meetings. So she's very resistant, and I'm really trying to get around that. So I guess I need to understand her perspective more to maybe bring her over. But it's on a really individual, personal level for me.
Yeah, I would say as well, we're stronger together, right? So an individual voice does not have as much power as a group voice. So there are advocacy organizations out there, umbrella organizations that can advocate for things. So quite often it's a matter of working with those groups, and lots of them have connections. They write position papers, they lobby the government, So as a group, it's very often more powerful, and you can get more results that way than just working as an individual. So find a group of like-minded people, always.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned Meetup. What are some ways, since we're using this virtual space, what are some ways that we can meet up or link with like-minded people that want to see a change or want to see this issue not disappear as soon as COVID disappears or as soon as the reporters disappear?
Well, we had last week, I think it was, there were 2 women from Costco. I mean, that's a BC organization of organizations of older adults. And so that organization takes on these various issues that affect us. Now, I used to be a member and I used to be active, but more recently I haven't been. But I think even becoming a member of those organizations and at least having your name attached, there's I have a few things that I know people say about, signing petitions and things like that, but there's a few organizations that put things out online. The ones I follow all have to do with refugees. They don't have to do with older adults. But there's a petition, and some of these things they get 200,000 people who have signed the petition, and there are changes that happen. It's because there's a centralized organization that takes on the responsibility of putting it together. And then the rest of us just sign on or just support or just agree. So I think in BC, certainly around seniors issues, there's being a member of Costco, or certainly being finding out what Costco's about. The other thing that we have in BC here that I'm not sure how many provinces do, but we have a seniors advocate here that's a provincially funded position. Now, I know that I've been to some of the forums and gatherings and things like that she's had, but I think being in contact with, being at least following what's happening on that level, then if there's something that comes up, then we can join our voice to it, right?
Yes. I wanted to ask a question of Joel and Luke. Some of you may not know, we have now a website, and people have called or they've asked about, for the places that they hear our podcast, for example, do they have to join something or whatnot? But could you speak to the PBA website? Is that someplace that if we were posting things to be attended to, or if we had like the sample letter that Chris wrote, if that letter were a template that somebody could use, is there a way that we could put it on that website?
Yeah, the website is, I'm actually just working on it this week. So for the general public, it could be a place where they can go and find the podcasts and more information about what we're working on, or if they wanted to get involved, that would be their first kind of touch point. But then on the behind the scenes part, I'm trying to get it set up as a place where we can manage member lists, maybe episodes for review, tagging our episodes with hashtags and themes and that kind of stuff. So just working on some ways to get us a little bit more organized. But I'm not ready to show it to you guys yet. But hopefully next week.
Is this Powered by Age website? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So now, what's functional on the site now?
It's right now it's shut down for the moment.
Oh,
so
okay.
So
there's a place, is it on the 411 site that people see the links to the program?
It's on our Anchor page, so anchor.fm/powered by age.
Is there a way you could screen share and show that? So do I have to give you screen sharing? Okay. Because I'm thinking as we have these different discussions, if something comes up like in this one, when you could, if we'd mentioned something that was good or effective that you used, and we wanted to say, well, listeners want to use it, you could go to our website and you could see a template for a letter about an issue. Other things that might, evolve as we come along, but I'm thinking that might be something we could build a capacity to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically what we're working on with Leslie and 411 is we're trying to use this podcast experiment to create a model that other seniors organizations could maybe replicate in different areas around the country. just so it, I don't know how many organizations there are around Canada, but if we could create kind of a blueprint, then maybe it would be easier for them to get up and running and launch their own similar program.
It's tagging on to that with the comment that Judith made about teaching someone. We do have, from both UBC and from Simon Fraser, people that are in technology and communications programs that want to be involved. And one thing, there was an AgeWell conference earlier in the week, and different groups that are using Zoom and remote communications, they've said that there's a need to do the old-fashioned thing of calling people up, that there's some people that just, you can't, tell them over the phone, or tell them through an email, that we have to call. So part of the time, both Adele and Robin are production associates and mentors to this group. They are calling people, some of the people that have never been on, to find out, why they haven't been on, or to invite them. And then this program was called a peer-to-peer program, so that there have been a couple of people who have taken the time to call someone who didn't understand their phone and help them understand how to get on Zoom. But the two things that are old-fashioned things that people abandon, letter writing and calling people. They've shown that when people get their mail and there's all this junk, if there's something that looks like an invitation or a card, they open it up because it's so rare that they get it. And so as part of our demonstration project, we're looking at, does calling people up help increase people that are calling on? There were certainly more people that, signed the intention to attend the meeting today as a result of the calling. So I think that just the patience, because it takes patience to tell someone, find the triangle. Do you have an iPhone or do you have an Android? Go to the Play Store. What store? So, but that's something that we are building in as our model, because people from all kinds of programs, medical programs, other programs that are working with people to introduce them to Zoom or Google Speak, or the other one, Microsoft Teams, that it really takes a phone call. And then in the education stream, the Ministry of Education bought 2,000 computers. And it's not for every child that doesn't have a computer, but particularly they've earmarked children who have special needs, people who may be more disadvantaged. I don't know all of their criteria, but they bought these computers to be delivered to their home, because in this era where there's so much remote education, they were getting behind, and they wanted to stop the risk that they would get behind because they didn't have that device. And then they paid technical people to go into the home. So people have said they wouldn't spend that amount for seniors, but they also said women wouldn't be able to wear pants. So we can we can say, why not? We do have computers. We had some computers that people would have had, and the very week they were going to be distributed, COVID came about. We do know from, I don't know how many of you, did any of you go to the conference? There was a big conference on older people, growing old gracefully. They had a lot of different terms for it, but it was held in August. And Best Buy was one of the people that had a demonstration. Luke was there. We had a room, a listening space where people could listen to episodes of our podcast. And Best Buy was there, and they said at that conference that they are teaching the geeks. They've selected so many of people that are in the geek squad that they are training to do 4 basic health indicators. So it actually will be covered through the health system, because they're going in, they do these health indicators that are needed, but they also help the people connect the computer. So, if that's something we could advocate for or learn a little bit more, from asking the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Studies that were involved in getting the computers to children, what would it take? What would need to happen, or what would we like to see happen to get computers to older people, or to get people that can go in and teach them how to use it?
Yeah, it's the support using the computer that's important because, I know seniors that have computers that really don't have a clue what they're doing with them.
I think it's personal contact, like you mentioned the phone call, because people like to have that personal, like it's more in line with our history, and it provides continuity into the technology.
Right. And what we know people don't like is the robocall, where it's a robot calling up saying, "How are you today?"
Oh, I just hang up on those immediately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people are using it as a health call, so we have to be different in our personal call and not, to say, "How are you? We've missed you," or "What's going on," so that they trust that it's not just somebody interested in getting in their program, but at the same time, we're able to communicate there is this program you can participate in. Okay, speaking of that, what we do at the end of each time, we ask people if there are particular things they want to present for the next time. And we are looking at next week is right in the middle of Seniors Week. And kind of our format has been that we have someone that we interview. We have some creative arts, whether it's a person that's doing a story, a poem. We might have some people that have a song. We understand that ukulele, and there's some group of musicians that are doing virtual things. But I wanted to get if there are any particular things that any of you want to do. We do have an interview by Sylvie, a program. One of the things people said that they wanted to do when we were meeting in small groups, they wanted to interview people in atypical jobs, seniors in atypical jobs, or that had atypical experiences, and also centenarians, people who've lived longer, and the scientific question of, is there an aging gene? So are there any particular burning topics or people, things that you'd like to do next week to connect with Seniors Week?
I'm going to have something off of this call that I just had to step out for. I'm just processing right now, but I think I got some good news on the way about COVID-related information that needs to get out to different groups, and it came up that I saw an opportunity to get that type of information to the seniors groups that we all need right now.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm forming my thoughts around it. I got to talk to Luke about it, but it was a very positive call, and I think there's something that's going to come out of it that's going to be good.
Charlotte?
Yes.
Were you able to find anything out about the YMCA digital workshops on teaching people how to use different aspects of the technology? Like, I think I sent you a link, but I don't know.
When you sent the link, the thing that I had a bit of a conversation with Luke, that maybe a thing that we could do either at the beginning, 15 minutes before our show, that we could do some things on technology to show the people that have already, we have about 44 people. Some of them are not coming on the line, but that's something that we might have is each time a lesson related to some aspect of technology.
Right, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, like Quirky has done, we are actually right now putting together a short video program that's going to be part of a Surrey Pride's virtual festival, since they can't have it. But I just realized the video wouldn't work here. I was going to say, because some of them are short enough that we could, 2 or 3 minutes, but it wouldn't work as far as.
So what were you thinking, Pat? Are there some specific, what's the topic of the videos you were talking about?
They're all related, of course, to Quirky, but we put one together for the International Day against homophobia and transphobia, which became a larger piece, and we were just part of it. And basically what we were doing was we talked a little bit about ourselves, and then we were promoting our new book, our new anthology. And so there's visuals of the cover and like that, but there's just different people who have say different things in it, and as I say, it's fairly short. And we have another one that's older that's also very good. That's going to be part of this Surrey Pride. I mean, I don't know if you could. I could send you I'll check out first with Quirky to see if they're okay with it. But then I could send it down to you, and you could decide whether it could work.
So do you think it would be more appropriate for the fourth when it's something related or connected to Seniors Week, or putting it over into August during the Pride Month?
During Pride Week, yeah.
Well, I know either one, I guess, would work. Yeah, I mean, we normally have. I mean, from the time that the Roundhouse started the arts the Arts Day for seniors, that
Yes.
has been going on now. We've been part of that since then, and so we've always. I was thinking of that. Maybe someone from our group who's written something in our new book would come on and read. You know, that's a possibility too for Seniors Week.
I'd certainly, if people are interested, I could certainly go back to the chair of the Seniors Advisory Committee for the city and see if she'd be available on the Thursday during Seniors Week. I mean, that's a possibility.
And who is that person?
Colleen McGuinness.
Okay. Because I think also that was someone that Marion from our 411 board had mentioned that there could be a resource to us. But is Colleen McGuinness?
Colleen McGuinness, yes. You want her phone number?
I can get it from you.
Okay.
Later. Okay, so I'm thinking if we draw a circle of what would be the contents, if we have something, maybe something that's from the creative arts in the video area, whether there is poetry or a story, maybe a story from Quirky, or do you have Leslie or Judith? I'm tempted to say Poser because your phone is called Poser. Poser Judith.
I have to get another device in order to change my name from, and I haven't got that yet.
Okay.
It's in the works.
Leslie or Adele, do you have any?
Yeah, I'm just thinking Seniors Week, maybe thinking about memory again. I have a short story that was actually published in Canadian Stories, which is sort of a family history thing, which I think might be kind of interesting.
And how long is it?
Probably 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Quite short.
Mm-hmm. And then we have Sylvie's interview, because that was showing one of the things we're looking at levels of technology, how we are doing transfer of technology. So the very first thing was using the phone, and then the next level using Zoom. And then she was at another level that three of us were talking about this morning, having your own Zoom room where you use your Zoom to interview someone else. So that would be a good example of just climbing ladders of technology as we are moving through this program.
Yeah, I think the big thing that's getting lost is the actual issue of isolation, because, as we've said, there are a lot of seniors that aren't tech savvy, and they like those phone calls. They like that personal contact. And I know Century House has got a group of volunteers together just to phone members just to see how they're doing, which I think is a great initiative. And I'm sure lots of other senior centers are doing
Britannia's
similar
doing the
things.
same thing. Yeah.
The 411 Center is calling people for a well call, but I think for our podcast call, we're also calling people who initially were excited about being involved, and just for one reason or the other, I mean, they're not using they do sometimes use their email, but that's another thing that we'll be continuing, and maybe we'll have even more on.
Yes, somebody called me this week. I said I already go.
It might have been Robin. Yeah.
It might have been. She said, "Oh yes, I see your name here."
So that's for that week. And then with as we move to the 18th and 25th, what we were talking about in our small team meeting is the issue of, or the range of indigenous issues broad enough that maybe it's not a choice of do we do it on the 18th or the 25th, but do we do something special on both the 18th and the 25th? For example, they're the political issues that are justice issues that are involved in Red Women Rising. But Adele mentioned a filmmaker, that there's a documentary. Can you tell the name of the film again?
It's called Unseated Chiefs.
Unseated Chiefs. That that might be another aspect, if we, from the creative arts side, something that's talked about indigenous issues. There's quite a bit of music, and last year there was a film festival. It probably, got shelved, but we might be able to find some of the people that created films for last year and show their trailer, if nothing else, within.
Yeah, does the National Film Board have anything?
Yes. Yes, they do. Yeah, they have a list.
There's an organization well, Simon Fraser last year was the host of the Indigenous Film Festival, so we could contact them to see, if any of those people that presented would be available to show theirs, because they did have their film finished, and there were trailers that they used to promote the Indigenous Film Festival.
I'm going to have to go. I have another Zoom meeting and I have a call I have to make before that. I guess I always thought that this went from 1 to 2, but it's longer, right? And I maybe it seems like it's been different times that it stopped, that we ended.
Well, today, because we had this problem, it seemed that some people didn't get the link or whatever was happening. We started a little bit later.
But is it usually an hour? Just
yes.
So, yeah. Okay. Because I do have something else I have to go to every week, same time. So.
Okay. Well, even though we end at 2, sometimes right after 2 we formally have stopped the recording, but people have ideas or suggestions for what we'll do in the future, so we spend a little time talking about that, but formally it's an hour.
Yes. Okay. Well, okay, it's good seeing everyone, and I'll see you next week. And
Bye.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'll see you on Tuesday.
That's right.
Talking about videos, I went to, it was an event called Good Pitch Vancouver last year, and they were pitching trailers for various documentaries that were in production. One of them was called Klabona Keepers, and it was about the native nation that has been trying to protect the headwaters of the Stikine. And apparently they've been quite successful. So they were making a documentary about this. I don't know what stage it's in, but that might also be something. I could try and find a contact for that if you like, Charlotte.
Yes, that would be good.
Yeah.
Because it gives us, we have a couple of weeks to work on it. So that's the other thing too, with people and the mentors that you have. If there are 2 or 3 people interested in a thing, it will work to have a time to call you off, away from this time, to kind of plan and detail a little bit more how you put together a segment on a particular topic.
I'm just wondering if it might be, if the documentary is not finished, it might be possible perhaps to get somebody from the production side to do an interview, perhaps.
Good idea.
Anyway, I'll see what I can find out and I'll send you an email.
Okay. Well, actually, Adele is a filmmaker. Can you follow up with talking with her about that?
What should I say? So just ask her if she wants to come on the show to talk about.
No, following up with Leslie, just with what the plans for what we would do with film.
Yeah, Leslie, of course. Let me ask me anything. You have my
email? Okay. I need your email then, Adele, maybe.
Okay, so it's AD. PH. EL.
ADEHEL.
AD. A like apple, D like Darren, T like H like horse, E
Mhm.
like elephant, L like love, and then A like apple, R like Romeo, O like Oscar, P like Peter.
Well,
I-
I've got your name in the window there. I noticed you've got ADHEL for your name, so there's no E in there. I thought it was, you said ADEH. So it's ADHEL, right?
There's a T there, actually. There's a T after the
Oh, there's a difference between our name and the email address.
yeah. There's
Okay.
between D and H, there's a T there.
ADT.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought you said ADE. ADTHEL.
ARO.
Arab.
Yeah.
Okay.
At gmail.com.
Okay. And I'm Leslie H at shaw.ca. I think I just type that in.
And if you need my number, do you need my number too, or are you just gonna?
No, his email's fine, right?
Okay.
Okay, so we have a plan, and I think the stories, as you mentioned, the story from Quirky and the movie, if we send it ahead of time so that Luke or Joe can take a look and see how it works, can do a test with bringing it up in a Zoom.
That's good. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here.
Hold
And
on, I just want to clarify. So we're talking two different things. Next week is the senior stuff, and then
yes,
we're talking about the other 2 weeks in June that are bookends the International
indigenous
Aboriginal Day.
issues. Yes.
Yes, okay.
But she said that the film that we were talking about, there was a film that you put, a video that Pat mentioned that might work well in the Seniors Day because you as an organization were
Oh,
made a
what
video.
Pat was saying.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Joel or Pat, Luke, do you have any questions?
No,
I'm
that was
good.
Okay, guys.
All right. Thank you.
See you
Hey,
next.
thanks everybody. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you
Bye,
so much.
Leslie.
I'll be in touch, Adele.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.